$80 million handed out by the Lilly Endowment for this idea of trying to raise up the potential for discernment among college students about vocation. So we did over the course of this study, we surveyed 2,718 students, graduates, alumni, and faculty, a total of 1,900 different individuals. Those 2,718 surveys completed, but 1,900 different individuals because it was a panel, and I'm going to show you what that means right now. So we had the class of 2001. This was the group that had no exposure to the Lilly Endowment programs. They were essentially our untouched group. We wanted to talk with them to find out what it was like to go to these three colleges before this focused vocational discernment activity was going on. The class of 2007 were juniors, and we interviewed them at the time that they were juniors, and then 2 years later at the time that they had graduated from their colleges. You can see we had some drop-off. You always have some loss of participants in a panel study like this. And then for the class of 2009, we interviewed them in the spring of '06 as freshmen, and then we interviewed them again as juniors. So these panels, although there's some attrition from the panel, which happens, we examined the panels in several different ways to make sure that we hadn't lost people according to only specific characteristics. So we're fairly confident that we had some comparable data in these panels. So this is what we want to know. Do students and graduates define vocation in ways consistent with a theoretical model? Do students report an increased understanding of vocation as a concept? And do students and graduates recognize they have a vocation? Have they discerned that vocation? And finally, are graduates living out their purpose or calling in life? Oh, this is a joke. Yeah. Wally, why did you choose insurance? You mean as a career? Let's see. It was a complex decision-making process. Oh, I remember. I needed a job. They had one. So much for follow your bliss. Why? Did it go somewhere? Many people take their first job thinking that they're not following their bliss. But the idea isn't necessarily that first thing that you do is your career or your vocation, but you have to maintain an openness to where that vocational opportunity comes. And it may be in that job and it may not be. It may be in all of the life that you have outside of your job. You can have your vocation in ways other than simply in the work that you're paid to do. I happen to be very fortunate in that I had a job that was just, to my mind, beautifully aligned with what I had hoped to do and also doing things that to me mattered. So, the definition of vocation. The students and graduates define vocation in consistent ways. Here was our first look. We had the class of 2001, which is here. And 45% of them define vocation only as a job. Notice, though, that in the students that had been exposed to the vocational study work at each of the three colleges, very few of them defined vocation as just a job. Only 4%. The most of them said that it included a profession, the 65% of those that had been untouched by the intervention at the three colleges. But then if you look at the question, does it include the idea of a calling, 50% of those in the class of 2007, that was the juniors that we interviewed, said yes, it includes that, whereas only a quarter of those that were graduates and had not been exposed to that described it in that way. So what does that answer? That answers just one simple thing. If you expose students through a variety of programs, classroom content, advising, centers for vocational reflection, if you expose students to this, can you influence the way in which they think about vocation? The answer is yes. This was the model that we used, and I talked about this at the beginning of the talk. That one has gifts and talents, one has a discernment of the strengths that one has for him or herself. One learns about and understands and gathers information about the community and the needs of the community. And that God, or some higher power, or some spiritual sense, or something other than you, produces this self-discernment. Now, one of the things that was interesting is it turned out that even atheists and agnostics who reported in the survey that that's how they felt, they went on this spectrum, they gained this sense of vocation. There was that even without the God part, there was an element in which there was changes in those that were exposed to this around the connection between vocation, calling, and community, gifts and talents, and what was needed in the larger world. I'm going to skip over a couple of these things because I want to talk about the things that made a difference. So they identified components of the model, and you see that the class of '07, which was exposed, had much greater descriptive information in qualitative interviews about the model. These are the best predictors of increased understanding of vocation. I just want to reflect on these. This is the last slide I'm going to use. I'm not going to talk about the rest of this. They observe someone living out their vocation. They're involved in some organization, church, religious, or spiritual organization. They're currently attending church. They had some type of service learning experience or another off-campus study or volunteer experience. These are the things that predicted a higher likelihood of understanding, calling, and vocation. So I want to stop there, and I want to ask you, this is, I think I'm within pretty close to my time limits. I said we can spend a lot of time talking now, so I hope you're ready to talk. I want to ask the question, what is it that you think when you think about your own calling and vocation? What do you think about? What do you think about? If you're asked to reflect on where am I going? What's my path? What's the river into which I'm going to jump? I've taught a lot of college classes, so I can stand one. I know you have thoughts. Is that him?
Yeah. I would say that, it's based off of what you would want to see as a change in the world, or like an increased understanding in yourself, or spreading an increased understanding to others in certain areas of the world.
Thank you. Very thoughtful answer. Yeah. Wanting to have a greater understanding, things that you see in the world, wanting to have a better understanding of yourself. I think that's one of the things that we saw happen in college a lot, was there's not only exposure to a wider range of things that are going on in the world, but there was also further discovery of oneself, one's own talents, one's thoughts, the things that excite you, the things that get you interested. Other thoughts about vocation or for yourself? Thoughts that may be frightening. Thoughts that concern you. Please.
I think the concern that I have about living my vocation is a lot of times feeling that I'm not doing enough, or am I doing enough? Always that question of, is what I'm doing enough, and am I giving it my all, and so on and so forth.
That's a great question. I think everyone asks that question about whether what I've done is enough. And I was thinking when you were reading the resume and stuff that I was doing, I was thinking, well, geez, I feel a little tired hearing all that. But I'm also, I have to say that every day I have that same thought. I think that's a very common thought. And I think one of the things that I personally have trouble with is that sense of being overwhelmed by the nature of the difficulties that you're trying to solve, or the problems that you're interested in addressing, and feeling like you can't give it. Well, how do you deal with that feeling or that thought? Yeah.
That was a rhetorical.
You brought it up.
I don't know.
Others?
One of the things I hear students talk about is that if you want the two to mix, vocation and occupation, life's work, that oftentimes you're not going to have any money, right? The jobs that really make a difference are not going to give you the things that you might want materially. And so that's one of the things that students, I think, sometimes worry about.
After watching that program last night, I was thinking about how important it is for it to become a strength that we live a simpler life. If you project out the consumption patterns of the world over the next 50 years, and you look at all the cultures that emulate American society, where we eat on the food chain, the amount of electricity we consume, the amount of clean water that we use and consume and waste. If the rest of the world follows our golden example, we are surely doomed. And I know this doesn't help very much with how much is in your pocket today and can you go buy something to eat. But the point is that we cannot continue to replicate the life of consumption. Robert Reich just wrote a book. He was the what was he secretary? Secretary of Labor under Clinton. I knew Nancy. Secretary of Labor under Clinton, and a great speaker. He speaks often on public radio, and he's just finished a book, and I'm forgetting the title of it now. But the book focuses on these disparities that we have in wealth and income. There was a recent editorial about this in the Strip. But the point is that since 1928, we've never had an experience of such disparity in wealth and income in the United States. We've never, ever had this kind of disparity. And when it comes to wealth, a very small percentage of Americans own about 80% of it. It's unbelievable. One of the things, of course, we have mass marketing. I used to do a class, when I taught introductory sociology, one of the things I had students do is we'd have them do advertising studies on TV. It was really easy. You'd pass out these papers, and then you told students to watch TV for 2 hours. How many have ever watched TV for 2 hours? Don't put your hands up, it's all right. But the point was, I asked them, watch what you're being marketed, and then identify the value that's being appealed to in this marketing campaign. What are they appealing to you? Are they appealing to your looks, to your beauty, to your vanity? Are they appealing to your desire to have more, to show more, for more glitter, for more glamour, to look better than everyone else? What is it that they're appealing to? And so I'm going to just take your question, Tim, and I'll just turn it back to you. So what do you want to stand for? What do you want to stand for? I know when you're a lowly college student and you're wondering, can I even pay my tuition next semester? And how am I even going to be able to afford lunch this week? And what about these commitments I've made? It's hard to imagine this, but there may be value in taking the high road. And the high road may not pay off. And I'll say one experience. I became a sociologist. I was in a fraternity at college, I'll admit that. I was in a fraternity at college, and all of them were going to become doctors. And a lot of them did become physicians. Not my kind of doctor, but as they say, real doctors. And in becoming doctors, their incomes were really substantial. And so what I've done is I've befriended doctors. Because I find that they have more toys. They have bigger boats to go fishing on. So I would say if you have to take one of those career paths that doesn't pay too much, find friends that have more.
In your statement of finding what you stand for, a concern that I've ran across in taking the high ground and standing for something as your vocation, I constantly find the question of, does it matter? That, like, doing something worthwhile, while self-fulfilling, I mean, the problems of the world aren't going to be solved. Realistically, like there will be homelessness, there will be child abuse, there will be poverty, there will be war, and it's how to justify the small impacts that we can make in terms of the larger scheme, like if the world is so far down the toilet that it's not savable.
Well, it's a pretty funny question. How do you take solace if you're making small steps and you're working in one little area to make a difference for someone? It's kind of the starfish thing, you know, this starfish. You know, there's a whole bunch of dead starfish on the shore, and you throw this one starfish back, and you've saved only one. I guess I always go back to this thing that I learned in college, which is about the only thing that I ever remember that Calvin Coolidge wrote. Calvin Coolidge is one of our former presidents. He happened to be the only president that was affiliated with the fraternity that I was in college, so he made us memorize things about it. And one of them was persistence. And although I obviously didn't memorize it well enough to recite it to you completely, it was the gist of it was that there are a lot of things in the world, but none of them can take the place of persistence in the face of adversity. And I recently read a book called The Longest Walk. Has anyone ever read that book here? I don't know if you've ever. Radovich Wagner. I'm going to mess up his name. It's about a guy that escaped from a Siberian gulag and walked 3,000 miles with 5 compatriots to safety, and including across the Gobi Desert. And on any one of those days, he could have died. On any one of those days. But 4 out of the 6, I think, survived. And what they went through to survive was unbelievable. And anyone looking at this, you'd look at this and you'd read this and you'd say, oh my gosh, my life is so easy. Oh my gosh. Why would I worry about the things that I have to deal with in my life? And I just say that because there was no rational reason for him to persist in the face of that. There was no rational reason. When they had no food for days at a time, when he fell in the desert with no food and no water, there was no rational reason for him to try and persist. And I think in the face of all of the things that you see in the earth, that, not only on the earth but elsewhere, lots of times you feel that there's no reason to persist. And I guess I don't have a good answer, except that I've always found it better than the alternative. And I don't know, maybe some of you have some other secrets that you know about how you kind of keep going in the face of adversity. And everyone in this room has faced adversity. I look around. I know that the road has not been smooth for any one of you. And I'm guessing there are people here that are not native Minnesotans, and if that's the case, the journeys that have brought you to where you are today have not been easy journeys. And if that's the case, what is that journey and what made you persist? I'll end with the story of our new president of the Wilder Foundation. Her name is Michael Hang. And she's a Hmong woman. She came to the United States when she was 3. She had been saved by a group of lepers in Laos. And had it not been for them hiding them, she would not have made it to the United States. She was educated at an Eastern university. She took a high-level job in Ramsey County. She was brought over to Wilder to head up children's and family programs. And just this last summer was elevated to the job of president of the Wilder Foundation. At 3 years old, in a refugee camp in Laos, one could not imagine that. She will have an impact on the lives of people that live in Ramsey County. She will have an impact. She'll do it with her compatriots. She'll do it with her friends. She'll do it with her colleagues. But she will have an impact. And And I would say that the thing that drives me through adversity, and why I think we have to be in community to do this, is that you can't do it without your friends. You can't do it alone. You can't make a difference all by yourself. It's in community that we make a difference. I'm in the middle of a blurger process, we call it. It's a merging of Spirit of the Lakes Church, which is a primary gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender church, and our traditional Minnehaha United Church of